Thank you all for being here, and I also want to thank the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences for helping facilitate this event so that we could bring you all here together, as well as the project on serial cultures that Peter and Roland spoke about. So it's wonderful to actually be talking about this project that Sudha and I originally started in 2017, and we had never envisioned this is where we may end up with it. And along the way, Janki, who collaborated with us to actually bring it to you in the form that you see today. I'll briefly go through the history of our collaboration. What did we begin? What were our research methods? Briefly, what were our findings? And then I'll hand it over to Janki and Sudha to talk more about why this digital repository, what are we trying to do with it, what is the architecture of it, and then the plan for today is we'll hopefully speak for about 20-25 minutes. Then we'll break up into smaller groups. We've put together the groups so that we can have different age, experience, institutional affiliation in the same group, and we'll request you to look at specific bits of the portal, and then we'll come back and talk about it as a larger group once again. 2017, both Sudha and I had different questions in our mind. I had completed my work actually looking at soybean monocultures in central India. And the burning question was that, supposedly there's all these revolutions, green revolution, yellow revolution, all this prosperity, so-called progress, and yet the people I met were so malnourished. I mean, nutrition was a very big hole in this entire story, and I couldn't quite understand why. And in my earlier fieldwork, people would talk about eating all kinds of things in the past. And now they were basically eating rice, wheat, potatoes, tea, sugar. I mean, stuff that we all know now is not necessarily the best. So I was looking for a way to investigate some of these questions of dietary changes in relation to agricultural changes over time. And Sudha, if I can paraphrase what she was, she's part of, as a researcher activist for the past now almost 20 years, she's been working with Sangtin, this organization of Dalit farmers and laborers in the Avadh region, the north of about 100 kilometers north of Lucknow in the Sitapur region. And she'd been working with them. So this was a group looking at, looking into issues of rights and Manrega and employment. And, eventually it turned out, again, the question of malnutrition was very important. And so Sudha and her partner Dwiji, who've been also working on millets for a very long time, but trying to see if millet farming can be revived in this region. And they've been making efforts since about 2013-14, and the millet intervention was faltering. And so the question was, well, why? How do we take this intervention forward? Does it even make sense to focus on millets? Do we do something else? And so as we met at this Network of Rural and Agrarian Studies conference in Shimla, and so those of you who are interested, this is another network broadly looking at rural and agrarian issues, and we've got academics, activists, and a lot of other people part of that larger network. We decided to embark on this particular project. And what we ultimately ended up doing, one of our collaborators, Professor Ankush Agarwal, he's from this department, an economist. He's unfortunately not able to make it today. So we had an economist, myself, Sudha, and our entire group of, and predominantly women farmers and laborers in this group in Sitapur. We co-created this project. So something very interesting about this project is that I came with my own set of questions, but really a bunch of questions emerged from conversations within the field. So we did this consumption survey over 4 seasons, so trying to capture differences in diets across time to understand what is it people are eating today. And our surveyors were people from part of the collective. So people went into their own villages. We trained them in terms of the survey process, and they interviewed their own friends, neighbors to understand what is it that people were consuming in the current environment. Sudha and Surbala Didi, one of the members of the collective, conducted these 27 focus group discussions across 24 villages, I think about 200 plus respondents, mostly elderly respondents, to get a snapshot of historical food cultures and agrarian cultures. And some of the interviews and videos you will see on the website have also been curated through this process, identifying elderly respondents and talking about foods in the past. And we'll play one for you today. The over 100 farmers, government officials, traders, processors, all kinds of people associated with the agricultural quote-unquote supply chain. These interviews were done by me with Richa Didi, who is again part of one of the co-founders of the member collective, some with Sudha, And so we went around and conducted these interviews. And then, of course, a ton of secondary literature around food, agrarian histories of this region that we've put together, especially Sudha. So that's broadly our methodology. And I won't dwell much on this. I mean, this is one little academic slide that we have, but just to give you a glimpse of what were broadly our findings. Of course, we found that, the first line is around agrarian technologies and how the green revolution technologies came into this region, along with, government purchase of rice, wheat, and sugarcane in particular, how that transformed agricultural fields. So millets, pulses, oilseeds. I mean, this region was famous for its dals. So you speak to people in Gujarat, you speak to people in Bengal, and they'll say Sitapur ki dal. And now the dal has all but disappeared entirely. What we discovered was, interestingly, land reforms as a very important focal point in transforming how land was used. And whereas so much land was fallow in the past, and fallow land was important from a point of view of food, because uncultivated foods is something we discovered was a category that neither of us originally, when we started, was important to us. We were only looking at cultivation, and the importance of uncultivated foods came about very clearly, and its implication for nutrition and diversity. Commodification, for instance, milk turned out to be a very important story. You look at larger milk data in terms of consumption, and it seems that India is becoming a more milk consuming country, especially urban India. But most ethnographies of rural India will show that rural consumption of milk has come down significantly. People are simply selling it to the cooperative, and it's going into the urban supply chain, and children in rural India are drinking black tea, kali chai. And there's some interesting data we have from a consumption survey on that. And the other thing, what's on the bottom that you see, the aspirations aspect, this is something I think our portal dwells on this a lot more, because part of the logic of the portal, and I will leave that to Janki to talk about more, is whose stories are we trying to tell? What kind of history are we trying to put there? And so when foods are created into a hierarchy, where wheat and polished rice are privileged and millets are derided and degraded as sort of the food of animals, the food of the poor, then that also works into aspirations of people, that they want to consume what the elite are consuming. And their loss of food has a great deal to do with aspirations and the way cultural logics are structured around food. And of course, there's a whole gendered aspect in terms of drudgery related to millets that Sudha will certainly mention at one point of time. But these are broadly some of the things we found. And of course, our efforts have been to put some of this out in academic journals. And, if you're interested, we can share some of our work around that. But the bigger point, since it was a collaboration with this activist group in terms of structuring the research, was that how do we take these findings and do something with them that's outside of academia? And what are the audiences what audiences are we looking at? So one audience is clearly in Sitapur, the people who are living there. How do we get them to think about their own food cultures and how things have changed over time? And Sudha may mention a little bit about that in terms of fruits, for instance. What kind of fruits people value in terms of their own history and past versus what they see on the market. But also, in what ways could this material be taken to urban audiences, to students, to other people, and what was the best way to do this? And this is where Janki comes in. So I'm going to hand over to Janki now. Oh, sorry. Okay, so before I hand over to Janki, it's two, 3 minutes, 4-minute film. Okay, on fish. On fish. Okay, so let's hear that first.
चावल की 2 रोटी बनाते हैं और छोटी छोटी वाली मच्छी और उसके साथ में खाते हैं। अच्छा, सामा की रोटी और भूत। पहले लोग कहते थे बहुत अच्छा खाने में लगता था और ताकत बहुत होती थी। उससे खाते भूत में बहुत विटामिन होती है। और भूत कहाँ से लेते थे, मतलब कहाँ से पकड़ते थे? तालाब से। नदी से बढ़ती है बढ़िया मछली तो 5 किलो रोज आती है।
हमारे सब ससुर 4 भाई थे। किशोरी के पिता जो थे साजिद थे, मैं बड़े की बबुला। 4 भाई बुढ़ा थे। रोज मछली कुंटल गाँव होती। और आपके यहाँ नदी होने के कारण मछली भी तो नदी कहाँ, नदी मछली तो बहुत बड़ी है। लोग सारे खाते हैं। ये तो देसी लाल पे ज्यादा से आप तो खाते हो? हाँ खाते। तो मतलब पहले जितने खाते थे अब खाते हैं कि नहीं? हाँ हम तो खाते हैं। पहले ज्यादा नहीं आपकी होता है। पहले भी जनसंख्या कम रहा है। पहले पर्याप्त जनसंख्या रहा है और ये चीजें ज्यादा रहा है, अधिक रहा है। तो ज्यादा जब रहा है जनसंख्या कम रहा तो लोग यही पर निर्भर रहा। जैसे सवेरे पर बच्चे आए था और 8-9-10 बजे लग फिर क्या करेगा और किसके बाद फिर बाद छोड़ जंगल में चल रहे अपना फैन जा और जो कुछ बन दिया और 1 घंटा 2 घंटा से कार के लिए बढ़िया और घर में बुरा करके रही बुरा आदमी में चला तो आया समझ लीजिए घंटा लाया तो रही आराम खाए। तो तब कई वैरायटी होती थी। कई का बहुत वैरायटी है। आप ही जैसे नदी में यहाँ है या गेट होते टेंगड़ा होते पलेट होते हैं रोहू होते हैं कौची है नगरी है बहुत तमाम वैरायटी है मछली होती। हर मछली के वैरायटी अलग अलग होती है। जैसे समय भी अलग होगा। करना नौवा है घूर है छोटी और एक 4 होती है गरुड़ा है। अरे बहुत वैरायटी मछली होते हैं जितने जैसे 36 प्रकार के अन्न होते हैं इसी प्रकार की मछली भी होती है। जैसे हमारे आप लोगों को जातियां वो सब मछली जाते हैं। कहाँ से मिलते थे मछली? समुद्र में लग रहा है नारियल बहेले वो सब आ जाते हैं तो पहले मछली डाक कम रहा है। देश में मछली होती ना तली में ऐसे सब पल जाती रहा गोल गई वो सब और मछली जब पालते हैं तो व्यवसाय लाते हैं बीज जिंदगी में यहाँ उतारते हैं तो उन्हें केला खाओ तो कहूँ लैया खाओ तो कहूँ फुल्ला खाओ तो बड़े बड़े होते हैं बेची जाती तब पर व्यवसाय पर मुक्ति ना आधा पर मुक्ति नहीं करना है। हमारे नहर फटार हमारे पाली जाती रहा हमने मछली को वो सब पकड़ते सब करके रहा आप कहूँ बहेर के पानी नहीं आओ तो मछली आओ तो हम दे वो मछली है जो नहीं पाली जाती तो तब तुम लोग मछली पकड़ लो तब गाँव पे दिखाते रहते खूब पकड़ा खूब पकड़ा ना खूब ब्याज चल रहा है क्या रखा और कतली कतली नहीं घूर रहे गाँव में खूब ले जाए छठवन पकड़ रहे खूब ब्याज से खूब बगिया लगाओ अब कम बगिया जब बहेर के पानी में तो बगिया कहाँ और खाते भी खूब थे सब खूब खा रहा खूब पकड़ते तो अभी इतना खाते नहीं पता चला नाच कम मछली जाता और जब अब दीदी खाते हैं देखे तेरे पैसा है वहाँ खरीद लाओ जहाँ बैकर भी सारा वगैरह जहाँ कम बाबू ते वो खरीद दें अब जहाँ ये पालतू मछली देखे दाम में खरीदे खाई पकड़ी कौन खाई अब कलिया सब बचती और सब मछली बचाओ भाई दोनों भरी मछली पकड़े दी अब तब जैसे बहेलू मछली रहा कोई कलिया बेचता बचाओ नहीं रहा जब मन हो रहा तब पकड़ पकड़ खा रहे और जब आना है सब अपनी अपनी कलिया में बैठे जब कोई व्याह मछली पकड़ ले उसका पकड़ के रहे हमारे लगे रहते मछली भी कर पा गई मछली नहीं कम है दीदी ये आप नहीं पानी आ रही दीदी तालाबों में पल रही नहीं है वो की तो दीदी नहीं सब मार्केट में नदी और नदी में पता लगे नदी मछली कम पड़ गई वो तो कम पड़ जाएगा दीदी लेकिन उसकी जगह पर फालतू मतलब मछली जो है मछली है मुर्गा है इससे ज्यादा मतलब कई गुना ये मतलब ये चीजें बढ़ गई।
So just very briefly, what you saw in the videos also, people asking the questions, they were part of our research team, many of them. So who did the interviews and who did the surveys. And so in that sense, it's been a collaboration even in terms of the research design and execution in this particular manner. And so now I will hand it over to Janki. And we can take questions at once we're sort of quickly done with this.